Posso começar?
Can I start?
Boa tarde.
Good
Estou aqui
afternoon.
encantado de ver tanta
So I'm
gente
here.
interessada
I'd love
nesse
to
mundo
see
da
so many
preservação
people
e da
interested
restauração.
in this world of
Antes de vocês
preservation
entrarem,
and
a gente
restoration.
estava se
Before you
perguntando quanta
started,
gente
you
vai
entered, we
aparecer.
were asking each
Então
other how
estamos com
many
a casa
people would
cheia.
appear,
Obrigado.
and we have a full house. Thank you very
Eu
much.
queria começar
So firstly, I
além
would
de
like to
agradecer aqui
begin,
aos meus companheiros de
and I'd
mesa,
like to
dessa
thank
conversa
our
que a gente pretende ter
companions
sobre o
here
assunto,
on this
que essa
panel.
mesa, a ideia
This
dessa
panel,
mesa,
the idea
ela
of this
tem
panel,
ela é um tema que volta
it
à
is
Semana
a
ABC depois de
theme
bastante
that
tempo, porque já
comes
há tempo que
back
a
to
gente não
the
falava
ABC
disso,
week after a long time. It had been
e
some time
nasce,
since we talked
digamos, de
about this. It
alguns
emerges
acontecimentos recentes,
from some
principalmente
very recent
o
events,
fato da Imago, que é
specifically
a
the fact
Federação
that
das
Imago,
Associações
the
Internacionais de Diretores de
Federation of
Fotografia,
International
por
Associations
proposta
of
do presidente da ABC,
Cinematographers,
do Mustafa,
as a
acabou de criar
proposal of the
comitê
president of ABC,
voltado para a
Mustafa,
questão da
created a
restauração.
committee turned to
E
restoration.
esse comitê é
And this
presidido pela nossa
committee
colega também, a Fernanda
is
Tanaka,
chaired by
e eu
our
também faço
colleague
parte desse
Fernanda
comitê que tem
Tanaka, and I'm
representantes
also
de vários
part of this
países.
committee with
E nas
representatives from
primeiras
several
conversas
countries.
com essas
In the first
pessoas,
conversations with these
surgiu a
people,
ideia, a
there
necessidade
emerged
de
the
fazer uma
need
espécie de
to have some kind of,
levantamento de
to do
informações
a
para
type
se
of,
querendo entender qual é
to
o
collect
panorama
information so that we
do
could
mundo da
see the
restauração em
panorama,
cada
the
país que
world of
pertence
restoration
a essa
in each
federação.
country that
Então,
the federation
essa
belongs
questão
to.
que foi colocada
Is in.
nas últimas
So
reuniões que nós
we had
tivemos,
this issue in
me
the
deu
last
assim
meetings,
mote
the most
para
recent meetings we
propor essa
had,
mesa.
and this gave me a reason
Propor
to
essa
propose
mesa no
this
sentido de
panel,
fazer uma
so as
conversa
to
que
have a conversation
possa apresentar a vocês e a eles que
present
estão nos
you
ouvindo pelo
and them
online
that are
também,
listening
do estado das
online
coisas no mundo da
of the
preservação e do
state of
restauro
things in the
aqui no
world of
Brasil.
preservation and
A
restoration
gente,
here in
aqui, esse grupo
Brazil.
de pessoas aqui
This group
mexe
of
com isso
people
há
here,
mais de 20
we
anos.
deal with this. We've
A
been
gente tem uma
dealing with this
longa
for more than
experiência
20
com isso,
years.
cada
We
um
have
na
a
sua
very long
área.
experience with
E
this,
eu acho
each one
que
in their own
nesses 20
area.
anos a
And
gente
I
participou
think
de
in these
diferentes
last 20 years, we
projetos, a gente viu
participated in
transformações
different projects.
tecnológicas,
We saw
a
tech
gente aprendeu
transformations,
muito.
and we learned
Então
a
eu acho
lot.
que a
So
ideia
I
de a gente
think
fazer uma
that the
espécie de
idea
balanço do
of
que
having,
aconteceram nesses
to
últimos 20
see what
anos,
happened in the
até
last
para
20
informar a
years,
vocês do que
so
é esse
as to
mundo no qual a
inform you
gente se
what this
meteu e
world is
circula
all
e do qual a
about.
gente
You know,
gosta,
this world
que a gente
we
acha que é
really
importante, a
love and we
preservação da memória.
circulate in is all about,
A
because we
ideia
think it's
então é
important
fazer
to
pouco essa
preserve
conversa
memory.
nesse
So the
sentido.
idea is to have this
Eu pessoalmente tenho
conversation.
muitas dúvidas
I
se o momento
personally have a
atual
lot of
é
issues,
melhor
questions with regards
ou
to the
pior do que
certain
já foi.
moment.
Às vezes eu acho que é pior do que já foi.
Sometimes
As
better or
condições
worse
que a gente
than
está
they were,
lidando, os
they have
problemas que a
been
gente
in.
está
I think
lidando,
they're
eu
worse
acho que é uma
because of the
realidade que
problems
a
we are
gente vale a
dealing
pena a
with.
gente ouvir
I
os
think this is a
colegas
reality that is worth
comentando.
listening to our
Então,
colleagues
sem me
here
estender
and talk
muito, porque a
about them.
função do
So without
mediador é passar a
extending
bola,
myself more,
eu vou
and
passar a bola
I'm
aqui para o
going to
Jorge,
give the
nosso
floor
colega,
to
diretor de
Jorge,
fotografia e técnico de restauro colombiano, que trabalha na
our
cinematografia
director of
colombiana.
photography
Ele
who
vai
works in
apresentar
Colombia,
panorama da
and
situação
he's
na
going to give
Colômbia.
us the
Depois
situation
o
in
nosso Paulo
Colombia.
Sacramento,
And then
diretor,
afterwards we have
produtor,
Paulo
também
Sacramento,
envolvido com projetos de
director,
restauro.
producer, also
Patrícia de
involved with
Filippi,
restoration
técnica de
projects.
restauros, trabalhou
Patrícia,
muitos anos na Cinemateca e
technician,
continua trabalhando
Patrícia
na
de
área.
Filippi is a
Alice
restorer,
Andrade,
works in
realizadora,
Cinemateca. Alice
restauradora,
Andrade,
curadora
film
de
director,
projetos.
restorer,
Alice é
curator
uma
of
das,
projects.
talvez, pioneiras
Alice
nesse universo.
is one of
Ela
the first
o
ones in this
projeto Joaquim
universe.
Pedro, do restauro Joaquim Pedro, ela
And
nos trouxe uma série de
she bought
questões, uma
us
série de pessoas para colaborar.
a series of
A gente começou a
issues.
aprender isso há 20 e tantos anos atrás com o projeto Joaquim Pedro. E o Rodrigo, que faz parte dessa viagem também junto com a
And
gente
Rodrigo,
lá de
that is
trás.
part of this trip.
Então, apresentados precariamente,
So
eu passo a palavra ao Jorge.
I give the floor to.
Bueno, buenas tardes y gracias. Hola. Bueno, es fundamental esta mesa por varias razones. La primera de ellas es poder dar a conocer un poco cuáles han sido las experiencias en la posibilidad de recuperar
I'm sorry,
la memoria
the
audiovisual,
sound
particularmente la memoria
has disappeared here,
cinematográfica.
so I can't hear them
Es un
speak.
trabajo con el que hemos venido desarrollando todo un proyecto a lo largo de más de 20 años. Fundamentalmente quiero referirme aquí a dos cosas. Uno, el hecho de que exista la materialidad, en el caso del material fílmico, Y lo segundo, y lo más preocupante, es lo que está ocurriendo ahora donde no hay materialidad. Es decir, me refiero al mundo de lo digital. Esa inmaterialidad del soporte o la falta de existencia de un soporte físico, como si existía en el 16 milímetros, en el 35 milímetros, es una de las preocupaciones más grandes que nos están llevando a diseñar estrategias para poder que realmente esto que es digital y lo que realmente se está convirtiendo en digital, porque finalmente lo fílmico en la mayoría de los casos está pasando a ser un archivo digital, todavía sigue siendo muy vulnerable y todavía no existen herramientas en el mundo que nos garanticen, al menos en el mediano plazo, la subsistencia de lo digital, que esa es realmente la preocupación más grande. Es decir, creo que en este momento son más vulnerables las películas que han sido rodadas en soportes digitales o en una tecnología digital que aquellas que fueron rodadas en 35 y en 16 milímetros. Para comenzar, quiero presentar un corto video donde básicamente hemos hecho una investigación sobre lo que fue la evolución de la llegada del cine en color en general en Latinoamérica, pero en esto que vamos a mostrar es en particular en Colombia, donde no era el color pintado o embebido de color, sino ya era la emulsión de color. Entonces, lo primero que vamos a ver es una película del año 1946, o un pequeño segmento de la primera película en color en formato de 16 milímetros que se filmó, que se hizo muy cerca de la frontera entre Colombia y Brasil, en la zona del Baupés, donde todavía existían las zonas de caucho, los cultivos de caucho, y estaban las poblaciones indígenas en esta región. El segundo segmento, que son muy cortos, corresponde a la primera película que se hizo en 35 milímetros, que fue cuando salió la primera película monopack de Kodak, que era completamente una emulsión en color. Y el tercer segmento es una prueba de revelado en color que se hizo, la primera película revelada en color en Colombia en 35 milímetros, que se le aplicaron unas técnicas particulares, ustedes las van a ver ahí en el registro de la película. Pero básicamente esto es para hacer entender un poco la importancia que tiene la conservación, la restauración de las películas, para poder entender cómo evoluciona una sociedad, para poder entender técnica y tecnológicamente cómo cambian algunas situaciones, y también para podernos entender como sociedad, ¿no? Que es básicamente una de las intenciones principales de hacer este trabajo. Entonces creo que vemos el video y continúo ya hablando los 5 minutos que me quedan.
Pode soltar o vídeo dele, por favor? Eso es la restauración, la versión restaurada.
Esta es una versión restaurada, obviamente estamos viendo una copia en una resolución pequeña. Se hizo un escaneo de película a resolución 4K, un escáner Laser Graphics Scan Station, que fue el que se utilizó para el escaneo de esta emulsión. Esta fue una emulsión que estuvo perdida por más de 40 años, es decir, se supone que no existía, y después de una búsqueda más o menos extensa pudimos dar con la película. Se descubrió parte de los negativos de la película estaban en Nueva York en un laboratorio, y la otra parte estaban en Patrimonio Fílmico colombiano. De ahí pudimos sacar esto, que obviamente es una copia hecha desde un positivo cinematográfico de 16 milímetros. Si ustedes ven el color, esa es una particularidad que tenía la emulsión de 16 milímetros de ese periodo. Es una película Kodak, marca Kodak, y todo el proceso el proceso de restauración de color se hizo basado en la estructura de la emulsión Kodak Chrome, que es la que corresponde a este tipo de película. Este segundo segmento que vamos a ver ya es una película en 35 milímetros.
Capital de la República de parroquia. En esta ciudad, como en el resto del país, el ritmo de progreso ha cobrado una intensidad excepcional. El 29 de octubre de 1954 se inaugura la primera Feria Exposición Internacional con la participación de 20 países y de las principales industrias nacionales. Los colombianos y las misiones extranjeras de Latinoamérica que llegan a Bogotá con tal motivo tienen la oportunidad de ver por primera vez el progreso avasallador de las industrias en la etapa de postguerra, tanto en Europa como en los Estados Unidos.
Y este tercer film corresponde a el primer
This
proceso de
film
revelado en color
corresponds to the
en
first
película de 35 milímetros.
process in 35 millimeters color development.
Esta era una emulsión que tenía un alto nivel de
This was an
descomposición
emulsion with
y
a high
obviamente tenía
level of
pues algunos problemas
exposure.
de humedad y
There
de
were some
factores
humidity, moisture
externos que afectaban
problems,
la
and
emulsión.
external
Hubo
factors
que
that
hacerle
affected
primero
the
una
emulsion.
restauración
One
física
had to do a
a la
physical
parte
restoration first,
fílmica
and
y a la
the film
emulsión, y ya después
and
hacer
the
el proceso de
emulsion,
escaneo
and then
y
afterwards the
restauración
scanning
digital.
process and digital restoration.
Muy interesante, Jorge. Cuéntanos
Very
más un
interesting.
poquito.
Very interesting.
Entonces, fundamentalmente, este recorrido un poco por la
This
historia del color, obviamente
is
muy
the
rápido
story of
y
color.
muy
This is a
fragmentado.
quick story, history of
Básicamente lo
color.
que busca es primero hacer
One tries to
entender,
do,
bueno, al menos
firstly,
en
is
el
to
trabajo que estamos
understand
haciendo
at least the
en
work that
Colombia,
we're doing in
sobre la
Colombia.
importancia
We have to
del
try to
material
understand the
fílmico y
importance
lo
of
que
the film
corresponde a la memoria de un país,
material
el hecho
and
de
what
poder
corresponds
mantener
to
en
the
buen estado el material
memory of
fílmico.
the country, right?
Lo
And the
segundo
fact that we
es
want to keep the
mirar de qué
filming
manera
material in good
casi que
state.
todas las técnicas y las
Secondly,
tecnologías del
almost all
audiovisual
techniques
se
and
mezclan al
technologies
momento de hacer este tipo de trabajo.
they
Es
mix
decir, aquí
together when we
debemos
do this
conocer
kind of
tanto las
work. We
características de
have
las
to know the
emulsiones
characteristics of
cinematográficas
the
de principios de siglo
emotions from the
o las
beginning
que
of
se
the
extendieron hasta
century,
principios del
the
siglo
ones
XXI,
that have
pero también
existed
conocer
since
las
the
nuevas
beginning of
herramientas
the
digitales
21st
para poder
century,
tratar
and
de,
new digital
uno,
tools
recuperar
to be
la
able
imagen, por
to
ejemplo,
recover the
recuperar el
image,
sonido
for
también, que es un
example,
tema
and the
fundamental,
sound,
y
which is
también
absolutely
poder mirar
critical,
cómo
and also be
almacenar
able
esa
to see
información
how to
para
store
poderla
this
por lo menos
information
guardar a mediano
so at
plazo.
least we
Es
can
decir,
store it
no
for the
hablamos en términos
midterm,
ideales de
right, or
poder
the long
tener las
term.
películas
We have
nuevamente
to try to
negativos,
have
que sería como
films in
el
negative,
ideal,
right?
pero que es un
This would be
ideal que tiene unos costos
ideal,
muy altos
but
y
it
que
is an idea
pocas
that
instituciones
is
se dan
very,
pues no
very
hacemos como Disney, que
expensive.
puede guardar
Very few
todas sus películas
institutions,
en
only
negativo
in this,
todavía, así sean hechas en
only
digital.
Disney can still
Entonces ya es conocer
store
las
their
herramientas tecnológicas, por
material in
ejemplo,
negatives, right? So
conocer
we
que
have to
después
know
de
technology,
tanto
right?
recorrer la
After
tecnología,
going through
el
all the
soporte que está dando
technology,
como
the
estabilidad
support
para
that they
poder mantener
give in order
las
to be able
imágenes a
to
mediano plazo,
maintain
además de la emulsión
images, right,
cinematográfica, es un
for
soporte
the
de
long
cinta
term.
magnética.
And
Hablo
also you
exclusivamente de
have
las cintas
magnetic
tipo
tape,
LTO, por ejemplo.
tapes like
La cinta LTO es
LTO.
una cinta
The
magnética, es una cinta
LTO
magnética que
tape
tiene
is a
cierto nivel de
magnetic tape
almacenamiento
with a
y
certain
tiene una
level of
capacidad de
storage
almacenar los
and
dígitos
has the
para poder
capacity of
conservarlos
storing digits
por
in
pruebas de
order to
envejecimiento acelerado que
concentrate
se le ha
them,
hecho
you know,
por lo menos
the
50, 70
accelerated
años,
aging,
que
so
obviamente
that you can
dependemos
conserve them
también,
for
en el
50
caso de
years,
esa
right?
forma de
And in the
almacenamiento,
case of this
de los
kind of
cambios tecnológicos que
storage,
se puedan
the
dar.
technological
E
changes that can
infortunadamente,
occur.
esas tecnologías las producen
Unfortunately,
4 o
these
5 marcas en el
technologies,
mundo, que son las que
only
se
4
encargan
or
de
5 brands
producir no
produce, and
solamente el
companies
insumo de
produce them
dónde
in the world.
guardarlas, sino cómo
The
reproducirlo.
input, where to put them
Entonces
and where
resulta
to
que una versión
reproduce them.
LTO5
So in the
ahora es muy difícil
LTO5
reproducirla porque ya no
it's very
existen
difficult to
reproductores
reproduce
funcionales
because you
de
don't have
LTO5.
functional reproducers
Entonces
of
ahí viene una palabra
LTO5.
fundamental y es como
So
la que
then you
hemos
have a fundamental word, a
aprendido,
critical word
y es
that
la
we have
palabra
to learn,
migración.
which is the
Es
word
decir, todos
migration.
estos procesos,
All of these
infortunadamente por ese
processes,
tema de la obsolescencia
unfortunately,
tecnológica
because of
programada,
technological
nos lleva a pensar en
obsolescence,
estrategias de
leads us to
migración todo el
think
tiempo,
of migration
con lo que
strategies all
implica
the
una estrategia de
time.
migración, no
And
solo
this
con lo que implica
implies,
a
what
nivel de
does this
tiempos,
imply?
sino lo que implica a nivel de costos
Times,
y también de
cost,
riesgos
and
de los
also
materiales
risks
audiovisuales.
of the material,
Entonces ahí es
audiovisual
donde
materials.
entra
So
la
this is
preocupación
where
principal y un poco
we
la que
have
me
the
motiva en
main
esta charla,
concern, and this is
porque
what
creo
leads
que
me
el
to
material
talk about
fílmico,
this.
bien
The
o mal, está
filming
protegido,
material
¿sí?
is
Salvo pues que hagamos
protected
malas
more or less,
prácticas y que haya
right?
incendios y
There
ese
are
tipo de cosas.
practices, and
Pero en general el material
it
fílmico,
is
por su misma
protected.
estructura de
Filming
origen,
material,
está bien
because
protegido.
of its structure
Pero
and
ya
origin, is well
los
protected.
repositorios digitales, tanto
The
los que
digital
conservan el material que estamos
repositories, the
interviniendo,
ones that
como
conserve
las
the
nuevas
material,
producciones, en
and
este
new
momento están en un alto
productions at
nivel de
this moment
vulnerabilidad.
in
Es
a
decir,
high
todavía no
level of
existe
vulnerability.
una
There's
garantía
still,
de que
it
aquellos
doesn't
archivos
exist
digitales que estamos
guarantee that
produciendo
this
o que estamos
digital
produciendo a
archives
partir
that
de
we are
soportes analógicos se
producing
puedan guardar y se puedan
and
conservar.
analogical
Es
can be
decir, un
stored and
fallo en la
conserved.
lectura de la
So this
información
is a
digital en un
flaw
disco
in
duro
the reading of the
puede
digital
hacer que una
information,
obra
for
audiovisual
example. This
desaparezca
might
por
lead
completo,
an
¿no? Al
audiovisual
menos en su
work to
estado de
completely
origen.
disappear,
Y esa es
at
una de las
least from its
preocupaciones
original
principales, y no es una
state. And
preocupación
this is one of the main
de esta mesa
concerns.
ni
It
de
is not a
Colombia, sino
concern
es una
in this
preocupación
table
mundial
anywhere else. No,
que
it
se
is
está
a
dando y que
global
realmente
concern
todavía
that
no
is a
existe
concern
una
that
vía.
is exists.
Se
There
había
still isn't a
pensado que la vía
way.
era lo que se
One
llamaba la
thought that
nube,
the way
guardar los
was
archivos
the cloud of putting
en un servidor
files
externo,
or the
pero
archives in an
realmente esa nube
external
es completamente
server.
vulnerable.
Server,
Sí, yo
but
creo que
this
ustedes
cloud
han
is
escuchado
vulnerable
los
too. You've
fenómenos que
heard
han ocurrido
of the
cuando un
phenomenons
servidor de
that
estos
has heard
administrado por
happen
terceros
when a
sufre algún
server
problema tecnológico.
managed by a
O por
third
ejemplo
party
cosas sencillas
suffers a
como que
tech
sufra una
problem
descarga
or
eléctrica
things,
en
or
la forma
for
de
example, you have an
alimentación del
electrical
disco.
discharge
Ese tipo de
in the feeding of
vulnerabilidades
the
están
disk. This
presentes
kind of
y es lo que
vulnerability
nos lleva a
exists,
pensar
and this is what leads us
y
to
un poco a
think
reflexionar
and
cuáles van a ser
reflect
nuestras
and
estrategias y
try
nuestra
to see
respuesta a esas
strategies and
vulnerabilidades a las que nos estamos
response to
enfrentando.
these
Por ahora
vulnerabilities
la
that we
única que
have
hemos
to
encontrado,
confront.
porque
For the
infortunadamente,
moment,
como
the only
decía,
one we have
solo hay
found, because
5 o 6 empresas
fortunately,
que producen la tecnología,
there's only five,
es
six companies that
adelantarnos en
produce this
términos de pensar
technology,
estrategias
is
de
to
migración
anticipate
para poder
and think
garantizar
about
que exista
migration
un
strategies to make
respaldo
sure
del material
that there is
audiovisual
a
con el que estamos
backup
trabajando.
of
Es
this
la única
material
garantía que
that we
podemos
were
generar.
talking about.
El
This is
resto
the only
toda sigue
guarantee we
siendo
can give.
especulación
And the
y
rest is
se le
all
suma la otra palabra que ya
speculation.
decía, que es el tema de
And
la
summarized
obsolescencia
to another
tecnológica
word,
programada, que lo
you know,
vivimos diariamente en
program
nuestros
tech
teléfonos móviles, ¿no?
obsolescence.
O sea,
You
un
know,
teléfono
like
móvil ya
us
está durando 6
mobiles,
meses,
our
hay una
mobiles,
nueva
the
versión
last 6 months,
y
and
las
then you have a new
fotografías
version.
familiares que tomé ahí
And
ya se perdieron
pictures
porque no
that
las
we
alcancé a
take are
descargar
lost
o no
because
las pude
they
leer
were
nuevamente.
uploaded, the
Ese
one
tipo de
couldn't read,
problemas
see
son
them.
los que
This
hacen
kind
que
of problems
nuestra memoria
leads
digital cada vez
our
sea más
digital
vulnerable
memory
y
to
que nos
be
invita a pensar
increasingly
estrategias de
vulnerable and
migración para
leads us
poder
to think
no
of
perder la memoria.
migration strategies so that we don't
Gracias,
lose
Jorge.
this. Thank you very much, Jorge.
Agora eu vou passar a palavra aqui para o
Now I
Paulo
will give the
Sacramento.
floor to Paulo
Eu
Sacramento.
queria só comentar que eu procurei
I would
fazer
like
um
to say
equilíbrio entre
that I tried to make
técnicos,
a balance
curadores de
between
projetos,
technicians and
que eu
project
achei que a
curators,
gente podia talvez
because I
abordar,
thought we could
tocar nas diferentes
touch
abordagens
upon
do
the
que o mundo restauro
themes
oferece.
of the
E
restoration
existem
world,
perspectivas
right?
distintas, às
And
vezes o
there are
técnico e às
different
vezes o curador.
perspectives. Sometimes the technicians and the curator don't, don't think, they think this is to provoke this issue. Paulo, you have the floor. Lauro, thank you for the invitation. We who are dealing with this, we know the importance of this matter, and I'm happy to see that people are very interested in debating this because it's a very important issue. Firstly, I would like to say why I'm here. This is what Lauro said. People know me as a film director, producer, and editor, but also my training in life, in finalizing films, and also with production made me learn because I was, as a film lover, many materials was being lost. And in the last 30 years specifically, where I participated with this more. And when I saw, I was increasingly involved. Now involved all the way to my neck. The last work I did was a huge work, which was the restoration of 10 films by Mujica. And I have them here to show you. We have this Blu-ray box launched in Europe, United States, unfortunately not in Brazil. And with investments away from Brazil, from the UK. It took 2 years in a lab, uh, a lab working almost exclusively in this film. And this is where we learn things. I think that this learning experience belongs to everybody because softwares change. And when we began this work, it was one thing. And when things were finished, things were something else. Things would go by way too fast. So I'm going to very quickly show you a material, 1 minute and a half, if Sandro can show us. It's a basic material. For example, I didn't use things that were flared, no. I wanted to show you what we were working on. On the left of the screen, you will see how the film was available before. This is a digitalized version that was circulating on TV and internet. And on the right, you will see the results of the work. Okay, Sandro, these are you see here the basics. You have dirt on the lead, things that are easy to remove, scratches, but also you will see two things that are very important that we will have to deal with all the time. Sometimes we had loss of material, stretches that were missing in the material, and sometimes we had to find several different mattresses in order to reconstitute this. What is very clear to me is this issue of the photography, the image, the conception of the image. Here you see this lost stretch, this bit here. Material was completely dark, but we had loss of information of the image. Much of what the film should be and existed in film is lost in telefilms and different versions, right? So when we are doing films, we monitor it, we track it like a sun, right, until we have the first copy, and then the film is born and has its own lives. Most of the telefilms by Mujica was not accompanied. No, they were not monitored by anybody. They were very precarious material, really precarious. I produced Mujica's last film in 2008. It closed the trilogy of these two films we saw now that had, and probably from that moment in 2008, we already had a demand away from Brazil for these films. And these films were in such precarious conditions that we couldn't exhibit them, we couldn't sell them. We didn't pass the minimum quality standards of broadcast, specifically away from Brazil. So one thing I wanted to say here, why do we talk about restoration? Why do we do it? For two reasons. One, to preserve these films, because these are films that are lost. If no matter how restored the film is, the film has a useful, a shelf life, right? So when we open the cans to start seeing this, we see material that is not capable of being processed anymore. So they are lost. So you have preservation, so the films can continue existing. And there is another one, so that films can be seen. They must be shown. These films have to be shown, then spread throughout. So these are two things that are completely different, and it has everything to do with this panel. Of course, there is an ideal of the preservation, the museological preservation, how one does this work. But the fact is that this work is done in great part for the market, so that films can be launched in Blu-ray in the world. Distributors are paying for this. Labs are working, are charging money and working normally. There is a market, an economy that does this. And also we have to find this balance between these two things. There is an analogy that I would like to make, something else that we experienced like 30 or more years ago, which was the story of music, the history of music. I would like to compare this to other areas because it's interesting to think about when we think about cinema restoration. Art, when we talk about the restoration of an of a painting, you have to restore as close as close as possible to the way it was created. And also we have the work of art in the era of technical reproducibility. Works that were done by Beijing many years ago, like 90 years ago. But in the 90s, we had this story. All music had to be remasterized, to be relaunched in CDs. This was a tech change that was huge. And exactly this that happened. The industry, the remasterized, the material had to be sold, commercialized, and go back to circulation in the market, like in another format. And these films were remasterized and remixed. And first you had the CD, and then you have the streaming, and what we have today, right? This is a result of the moment we went through. I'm talking to you about this because just like today we have this issue of restoration, there are tools that can modify a film. We go for a loyalty here, something that is utopic in a way, right? Where you want to be close to a material that oftentimes you don't even have the exact reference as to how that was, because copies have lost their color. Telefilms were done in a way that was different than the others. So this is a utopian search to try to find that truth of the original material. But with music, a specific case happened, which is a Pink Floyd album that I had that was Sources for Free Secrets. The market wanted that to be, it was homo, and then they wanted in stereo, right? It was in stereo. They wanted stereo. Everybody, the whole world bought this album. And then 10 years later, one said that you had to have a luxury edition in mono again. So you went back to what it was before in mono, and the Sony became much more expensive. And so we consumers are always going after, you know, this kind too. We're always going after the market and how things are done, right? So we don't, we can't do what Kubrick used to do, where he would check the greatest amount of copies. He would check projections because the projection changes the way the film is received. But we have to sort of like go with the ride with the waves in a way. And one of the things that we're going to talk a lot about today is the photographic fidelity or loyalty, right? And here in this small stretch of film, clip, right? Something that happens a lot today, for example, is a stronger contrast that is being applied today than what existed at the time and what the film reacted to. So today, this week, I saw a series that was done very recently. This is an example with regards to contrast. It is worldly, it is beautiful, but it's a contrast I had never seen. So sometimes I have to put dark glasses, dark glasses because it was so brilliant. It's a guarantee. So we have to deal with these kind of things today, right? We have to discuss this. I think also contaminate ourselves, trying to understand the different sides of things that are at game today, because our heritage needs to be restored, needs to be worked on. So in a greater pace than what we're doing today. And for this to happen, we can't have this fear that this material will be generated or that the market is demanding this, right? We have to work together with this market and try to give them the best results possible. And this is what I try to do a bit with this work of Musica. Sometimes we had, oftentimes we have very objective demands and reports that were unacceptable. It wasn't in their broadcast standard, and we had to adapt oftentimes. But on the other hand, we also have to struggle to preserve as much as possible these films. Only we as Brazilians and people that know the works of our directors, only we can do this. So we really did resist sending these negatives abroad. The idea was for them to be scanned and worked on abroad. We wanted it to be done in Brazil. But certainly this was the right decision. And the result was wonderful. We had every technical conditions to do this, right? And increasingly we see an increasing amount of labs opening, dedicating to this. And this is an urgent need that we have in order to rescue our cinematography and our images. Thank you, Paulo. Patrícia de Filippi, our restorer. We've done many, many projects together. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for your attendance here. As Lauro said, it's just wonderful to start this debate, to have this debate with such a huge and diverse public, right, audience that has a lot of stories to tell us too, right? Not only us here, we have the privilege who has the privilege of having the microphone here in the panel. I would like to thank ABC and the Cinemateca, and I would like to register. I would like to tell you about my concern with the collections in Rio Grande do Sul. We should help. We are here in the Cinemateca. We have technicians and conditions to be able to help. So I think we're going to have a network here that everybody is going to see, right? And if you can help us, you are all, everything is very well welcomed. Well, I began with this theme because I would like to reflect with you with a very clear theme about the planet Earth, which is energy. The energy to take care of analogical collections and then digital. It's above all digital. Today, we do not survive with preservation and what is being restored without an increasingly an exponential energetic load. And I don't see archivists thinking that the results of a restoration, for example, or in order to generate everything that is needed for a cloud, for a set of machines, so we can do everything that Paulo and George described. Without, we have to think of a clean and renewable energy. I mean, not everybody enters the first class, and projects too. We worked with several very important projects. We began with Joaquim Pedro's films. Lauro and myself were involved with Hector Babenco's films. It was an incredible experience because each one was done in one way, in one lab. Negatives and matrices were in different places in the world. So there was a huge survey to join all of this material. And at each lab we found differentiated solutions depending on the problem we had, or the same problem with different solutions and results. And so what is the result? What are we going to store? I keep thinking, if we put this in a timeline, the photography, cinematography, audiovisual, what are we going to store for future generations? So how was the material done to be exhibited? So Paulo, you talk about contrast monitors. I see 2 monitors here while we were watching the films. They are completely different monitors. So we see the same projection with different results. Completely different. And I really do like ABC for the monitors. But I'm doing this because this is exactly it. Sometimes we restore a film and we spend days thinking of that shot that had to change, or that plane because it had to change. And the person's going to watch this in the mobile. It's better to see the film, but there are so many possibilities that it is very difficult to control. I think ever since I began my work in this area until today, possibilities changed, and rules change, and protocols change. And today, the greatest protocol is to think of a sustainable world. Likewise for restoration and preservation. So restoration projects, the rescue of films are very important. And this is my vision. Today, obviously, it is wonderful to restore a long feature film. I think it's one of my greatest pleasures. But today we're here in a cinematheque, a house with thousands of films stored that need preservation, they need attention, they need tech actions. If they are faster, as Paulo mentioned, better still, in order to be able to dispose of films, to throw away less films. We had to throw tons of films. Some had never even been seen. It was a film that was censored, and then it was thrown away. It was never seen. It was disposed of. It was never ever watched. So we have to think of, in Brazilian cinematography, we have to give more room for these films, these orphan types of films. They are in ostracism. They are being forgotten. They are put on the screens again. And for this, unfortunately, we have to restore. So when we talk about restore to preserve, isn't it the opposite? We have to preserve and unfortunately then restore and restore so that that initial public right audience, did they, to have a film for that audience. How do we do this today? So I keep thinking, oftentimes I think I would go to my grandparents' home or my parents' home, and I would see a whole series of picture albums and portraits. And this happened in cyan, in magenta. I would love to see the paper, right? And I would try to guess. And this was in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And this was a vision. It was a, you could see, you could join material, the matter, the shine, the size, the format with that content you were seeing. And today, I'm not going to be able to leave for those that will come after me in the family. That doesn't, we don't have this anymore. Much has been lost. I have tried in protocol 3-2-1, 3 medias, one offline and 2 backups, or 3. And the other day I was surprised. I thought I was doing everything perfectly well. And I went to see an LTO tape. It wouldn't open. I picked up the corresponding HD and it also didn't open. And the other HD that was offsite, all of this happened because in the offsite HD, there was a disaster. A thief entered my house, my house was robbed. So I was left without anything that was in this material. And it was stored in an impeccable way, amazing way. It was just bad luck. I was robbed. My home was robbed. So I believe we're going to have many disasters like this. And for this, we have to have several copies everywhere and keep the industrial protocol. Migrate, 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 find other clouds, other servers. And if it was difficult, if we had this challenge that was difficult to store the original film, and we know, we've learned for so many years, we've learned now, right? It is important to put in a climatized deposit, right? We live in a tropical country that goes all the way from the Yanomami, the Indian indigenous community in the north to the south. Huge climatic difference, but we know that the material has to filter the air, has to have the right climate. Otherwise, the film is not going to survive. If we join this with digital preservation, this is exponentially more difficult, right? Everybody knows about this. And you have to have a huge amount of backups. So I'm sorry for my pessimistic testimony. It's alarmist. I think we're going through this. We're experiencing this life, this world. We have to be very rational. And we have to have a lot of planning and political will so that the material is not lost. So we can have funds to restore those films that are running risks, right? That are at risk. I have done a work that was intimately linked to the TV, the culture TV collection or works of art, right? Which is a fantastic material. There's unique matrices. It is rare not to have this. These are either negatives, they're reversible. You have a magnetic soundtrack, 16 millimeters, 95% of the collection, right? It's just matrix. It's an incredible responsibility. And it's fantastic because each moment of a TV report of the 70s and 80s is a real pearl. It's a jewel. It's part of the history. It tells our history and it preserves our memory. And memory is power. And that's what we have to struggle for in favor of. Memory is power. I love that. Lauro, thank you very much. I'm really touched. I'm very happy and thankful to be here in the Cinemateca. It is an honor. Thank you, ABC. Thank you, Cinemateca and Dom. My father, who took me here, and he said everything, he mentioned everything I learned here. I'm really touched because I really do love this matter. I had the privilege and the honor to experience the adventure of the restoration of my father's films that began in 2003 and went to 2007 here inside, in-house. And I'm very happy. I'm very happy with Bodansky, Jorge Bodansky, this fantastic Brazilian film director. I'm beginning the restoration works of his films, so it's marvelous. And Jorge, I'm going to use the microphone to say that Lauro is there with a bag of hard discs. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, but that's the reality, George. Please contact Adora. Well, so I'm a person that is in love with this subject. And I'm the daughter of a Brazilian film director that died very early in 1988 at 56. He left 14 films, 6 long feature films, and 8 short films that are very strong because they translate many aspects of the Brazilian culture from A to Z, from 1959, before the coup, all the way to 82, when the horizon began to lighten. So these films together have an extraordinary strength, and that is the importance of this project and adventure, which was us understand and be able to transmit for this material to be able to see by you and many other people. Although technology has really evolved from here on. I was speaking with Patrícia, and Patrícia said things really have changed 20 years from now, 20 years ago, right, to today. But still, the the background remains. I said I love this mashup because I began with this book that tells the adventure of the pioneers. Paulo Emílio, for example, discovering cinema, putting films to talk, defending all of this. So this is a fantastic book. So when I had my father's films, he died in 1988. 10 years later, I was invited. When he died, everything was okay. We did a retrospective. And 10 years later, after the color plan, there was an of another retrospective. There was no more negative, no Macunaíma, none of the negatives. And I was really panicking. I was 20 something years old, 27 years old. And I really rushed in despair to the French Cinémathèque, and the curator said, but these films were distributed. You have to find them. You will find them. They exist. They exist in France. So I began to look all over the place. And I came to the Cinemateca because Carlos Rodeco scolded me. He said they had material that was in France, right? And he said he had the original negative. And it was a real big fight in the beginning, and then this became a partnership that we did together with Patrícia. We did the photochemical restoration of 2 titles, Macunaíma and Padre Amor, the 2 films. We found a French specialist that helped us to understand, to find there 2 copies of the film there. And then the guy was really funny and a very interesting man. So we brought him to Brazil. And I spent 10 years joining information, asking for quotations. And in 2003, Petrobras became 50 years old, celebrated 50 years. My brother had this idea, and we managed to get the project. We brought all the material to the Cinemateca, everything that was in the Museum of Modern Art. It was all over the place. Everything came to one place only. and we began a true crusade to reconstitute. We knew we had a photochemical limit, and also I had some contacts in Europe in terms of digital restoration. But here, there was only post-production houses, companies that had no conditions of doing this. We did tests. We had the negatives of a short film. We thought it could only be 2K. This is an institutional film done you had a famous actress called Maria Claudia. There was a close up on her, and this was a first dilemma because we could see some hair in her face. And then I studied this, and I did a memoir, a thesis. I wrote a thesis. We knew that everything could change very quickly because the labs allow you to do anything with films, right? And for me, this wasn't just any possibility. They were my father's films. It was a person, a great actor, and the father of my brothers that only really heard about, knew their fathers through these films. So um, I have this PowerPoint here that has the whole adventure, all the difficulties, all the issues. And so here we initially, the budget was a photochemical budget for the whole work. We proposed this amount uh, to a person that accepted the matter. We had a huge package. Patrícia helped, and then at the time we were able to hire many people that fermented the lab or encouraged the lab. And thanks for this transparent relationship with Petrobras. I participated in contracts. We didn't know we had to go back to film. And then we were able to convince Petrobras to prolong financing, and we were able to do all of these things that were in the previous screen. This was a project with with all the backups that were possible. The problem, since digital changed a lot, and everybody wanted to change, right? So directors of photography wanted to remove parasols. They wanted to correct things. They said, can't you uh, delete this shade here? And I think, and it was a very polemic issue here. In Makuno Pima, film, we leave this for the second round. There were many controversies and polemics. And from a whole other side, I think that the film needs to continue with all the characteristics of its time and the team, including that shot the film. The whole thing was very difficult, and did it at the RAM. They shot the film at that time, and in that way, and it's important to understand the film from beginning to end. So we had these two supervisors that became kind of guardians of the thing, right? And when I started university, the search of material, this was when my father died. You can't see this, but I began with this list to see where things were. I'm not going to go into the other list because it's crazy. Because the most important thing for restoration are the material. And we know about the story about films, where they began, in what countries they were in, and how they were distributed. You can retrace the story of the film, its history. You can then begin to understand from all the different marks. You can sort of see, you can reconstitute the story of the film, the history of the film, its whole background, the whole, I know I'm explaining myself, but we, in the project, we, for example, we found by chance the original negative, which was in perfect conditions after restoring a really bad copy. So these are things you, in fact, have to do a very serious search of material. I can show you this list. We don't have time for it, but I can put it in the ABC site because you have everywhere, all the places you can try to find it in that you need to. This was the frame of the films. We worked on a methodology. We would put in first place the films that were more difficult and the films that would take 1 year, 2 years. This was the whole structure, and I believe that today we have 36 restorers working in 15 workstations, 3 supervisors, 1 set workstation, 2 diamond stations. It's a whole complete plant. Deaf clean, 2 people, great. Artificial intelligence. And very soon you will say, oh, what was the emotion like? How will you do? This is great. In 5 minutes we'll do this. In 5 minutes everything will be restored. But what was, all the things that were behind this, right? Because in my thesis, there was the guy that digitalized these magnetics of this film here. Between the first idea, when I think, I have an idea to make a film, and the projection in the film, in the cinema, there is a lot of work, there's a lot of people, and a lot of different people. In order to restore a film, you need to form different teams. But we work together, but it can only take a long time. It's not possible to do this quickly because it is way too many things there, too much responsibility. So I understand completely the dimension of everything that has to be saved, all the memory, but still at the same time, can you can you can you be so fast? Perhaps the time we gain with the digital restoration and artificial intelligence, we can gain with previous research, analysis of the material, trying to understand the people that were making the film, trying to understand the moment the film was being shot, talk to the people that worked on the film, try to understand the technology, everything that was behind there. Because in a project, we hired trainees, and I believed in all this methodology, right? Because I believed there wasn't a methodology, a complete methodology, because the science of restoration was going to you. But they made a series of recommendations. You can do this, you can't do this, and I believed every single one of these suggestions. And documentation, I worked on a thesis, a huge thesis, right? With all the documentation, everything we did, everything was. We, we had 12 archivists from Latin America, and this was going to become a book. We we showed a breakout of the accounts of the project. 2 million euros, 6 million, 2 million euros, 14 films where huge knowledge was produced. And why the huge knowledge is not systemized, this that we produced, we ended up not making a book. So it seems like we're always reinventing the wheel, beginning again, starting over, right? But knowledge does not permeate, does not spread out. Things become concentrated on very few people, and this is what has to change. In spite of all the urgency, I think it's ultra necessary and urgent, and I will begin with myself. I was rereading this master for a book. I will begin with myself by translating because it's in French, and I will publish this 15 minutes. I thought I had been speaking for half an hour. Still, but I will leave you. I think we have this obligation to transmit things we know because the feeling I have is that there are several very good people, each one working in their little square, in their little place. But you who are sitting here, we have to give you the means, all of you that are so interested. We have to create a methodology to have a constancy. Cinemateca is just was a fantastic in terms of restoration in 2007 with this fantastic park. But this has to continue, not us having to redo everything all the time. All the films, all the films restored here. And when the Cinemateca spent a year closed, it could have, the digital films are in Holland, migrating in the IANS Institute. Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to thank Lauro and the panel. I'm going to make a slight introduction to put the Cinemateca approach here. It's a good introduction for the table. But first thing I would like to thank Jorge and Patrícia for the analysis and Paulo for the previous conversations. It's inevitable now we are in the cinematography, and also because the restoration of approach in the Brazilian cinema has to do with its nature in itself. In this sense, the characteristics that are peculiar to the Cinematheque, that are peculiar in the global context, they determine this approach. In this sense, the Brazilian Cinemateca has the mission of preserving the memory of the audiovisual. And we work with conservation actions of the filmic material of our collection, 245,000 rolls of film, 50, 60,000 digital video objects. We work with the documentation of our works, the diffusion of our works. We have exhibitions out of the Cinemateca and formation and possibilities of access. The Cinemateca has a context here, created a context here, which is interesting for us to look at the Brazilian audiovisual memory. But these are not determined by the material in the Cinemateca. These actions depend on our capacity to prioritize among these huge collections more emergency situations, more important, and the capacity while we do this have partnerships, always working together with all possible people. In this panel, with the exception of Jorge, all the actions that the Cinemateca participated in to contribute with a process that was not demanded or emerged in the Cinemateca, they all took place. In the case of the Cinemateca, we have a huge collection, volumetrically very big. This characteristic is linked to archives that were originally wealthier. Brazilian production that is a continental-sized country is huge, right? We have a culture that is much younger, right? But it is very new still. So we work with a recent approach here. If we consider all the rest, we have a tropical nature that makes uh, which makes the material easy to deteriorate. And so the cinematography that has this very complicated weakness, historically speaking, right? Very fragile. 78 years. The Cinemateca is going to be 78 years now. Specifically, going to Alpine, Brazilian restoration continues being basic, as has been presented and introduced. We work with original films, research and comparison of material to choose the best matrices, images, and sound. The main products we have in this process that includes photochemical duplication, right? These are objects for long time storage. Film originals, we try to maintain them. We duplicate the film to film in order to for a long time preservation, controlled temperature, and also we've worked with digital processing, not only aiming to preserve the film or conserve the film, but you have difficulty in storing them and having them survive. And we know this is a constant danger, right? But we also want to create new digital matrices to facilitate access, right? It would be important to continue working with 35, and they take a long time. To allow access, actions have to continue in order for us to process in digital, but create all the sub-products for the consumption of this digital. And this is how the Cinemateca has worked. Currently, we work in black and white, 35, 16, negative, small formats, and all the rest. We have a film archive. We have parameter-specific focus that establishes the parameters of working on the material. We deal with tools during processing, always trying to maintain the attempt of reproductions of the characteristics of the original. When we digitalize material, we change the basic characteristics of the thing. But everything we do with the restoration process is to try to maintain in this new media with different characteristics, right? Consumptions, characteristics, projection. We have to try to simulate all the original characteristics we can. It is obvious and necessary for adaptation, specifically with these migrations, right? We have to adjust parameters because if it was direct, it wouldn't work. So we have to dose this, right? Which is complicated for us. And we have rules to follow. We are members of the Federation and we have to work with the Federation. One important guiding line is the PF ethics code and some technical documents that are in the FIAF site, a digital declaration that talks about digital restoration. After much debate, it was established, some recommendations were established for film archives to deal with restoration. This is a good guide and a good base. Things from the second part of our conversation. I had to change the end. When Lauro proposed this talk, one of the themes that we wanted to address, and I'd like to propose, is how the state of the, the state, how are the state of things in restoration? ecosystems and systems layers are definitions that we could apply to the needs, to our current needs. We need to be able to have support and media that have a chance of durability to store digital material, either because we digitalized the film or that they already were born with digital support. Like a magnetic tape, it could take decades, but the ecosystem necessary for this object has to be more complete. The drive has to survive, right? They need to survive more than 70 years. So the initial object can, and the software, the driver, connection, computer is a whole other layer of this ecosystem. So it's very difficult. Energy is a problem, cloud is a problem. So this whole set of systems don't work very well. We don't have a way out here. And so I agree with what you say, Jorge. Only thought about the market of things because it already, the consumption of new copies of restored material is a market, right? It has its autonomy. There are natural limitations. Using Mojica's example, material have been produced, but we still don't have access in the country because it's not, one didn't think of consumption here, right? So it's an ecosystem that doesn't really go anywhere. It is important. It's important to have everything stored and they can become a product, but it's not a material for consumption yet. Patrícia says that it's very difficult. Any system we have to face its sustainability, right? And what Alice said, we had a lot of initiatives. The Cinemateca and colleagues participated in. The knowledge was shared. I understand. It was spread out. It was, part of this ecosystem training, maintenance, and convey in transmission of knowledge. We don't have the things that ties everything up, which is the continuity of work. And I can say that there are moments and moments, and there are phenomenal interruptions. The system doesn't close itself. It's unsustainable because you have knowledge, there is technologies, but you don't conclude things because it doesn't maintain itself. It is lost. You have to transmit this. So the ecosystem is complicated, right? This is how they work. When we say it is difficult to restoration in our laboratory, it's because we tend to insist here, because that's why the laboratory exists. We try to process all supports and formats in this Brazilian Cinemateca. It is complicated because we need a huge hall of equipment and machine to process all this material. In this sense, systems contemplate our capacity of doing the maintenance of machines that are completely obsolete. There is no market, no supplier, there is no company interested in working with this because it's not profitable. There are very few machines. They generate such specific knowledge that is not reproducible and cannot be sold. So we depend on suppliers and manufacturers of live films, scanners that are already going into the hall of obsolete equipment for the market. So the ecosystem has to close. And our projectors, our projection equipment, 35 millimeters, digital. So it is very complicated to maintain this ecosystem sustainable. We need the people with specific technical knowledge. We need legacy equipment that is very difficult, right? Old equipment. There are people who are working with retrofitting, reverse engineering, and really crazy adaptations. There are attempts in the world to use scanned material to substitute color analyzers because they can't maintain the analyzers working. So we have to find technologies to be able to mark the light so that we can do the copy. And we're doing this. This is being done from scanners. It's difficult to find sustainability. The state of things involves several ecosystems working in working together for things to work out. Great, Rodrigo. Thank you very much. So before I open up the questions, I would like to see if anybody in the panel has a comment to make, compliment an idea that is not clear. Is everybody happy with what they said? Well, you began by asking the provocation for this panel, right? Were you were talking about colleagues from another country. You would ask if it was worse or better than here. I don't know if anybody said if it's better or worse. I think it is much, much better. It is more democratic. Before, the laboratory was either commercial or it belonged to Cinematográfica. Cinemateca. There was a laboratory and it began with two labs in the technological renovations. Things are opening up more now. I think we can process films and put them on the screen. Many more films than before. The how we have already addressed here. It is the balance of things in a way. I confess that I'm a little concerned because I believe, for example, what Alice showed us. All the knowledge that she accumulated in the project, and I benefited and I learned with that project. And I have this feeling that all of this does not circulate and doesn't reach new people. So I think we have a limitation. People that are working with this, training new people, the training of new people. Well, I don't want 50 people, but I think that we had more solid, more involved teams. And the way certain projects are being done in a very rapid way. There are restorations and restorations. Oftentimes um, we sell things that do not have a good quality, right? Remasterization is one thing. The degree of restoration in a project that is linked to budget and size and time. I think Alice said something that is very important. It's the need to rescue the spirit we had in the past, to resume this and form this group here. And we need to form a new generation of people involved in restoration, new restorers. And this is something that really bothers me. I don't this is what leads me to ask whether things are really good or not today. If each person can restore in their computer at home, this is very democratic, it's great. But the disconnection of this person, this disconnect, right, with the ethics code of FIAF, a curator like Paulo, that this person lives in the world without criteria and perhaps does not contribute for our universe in the best way. And this is why I don't completely agree with you. Anybody else like to say something? I would like to resume this theme, the importance of going back to this ethics of restoration, the concept of what it means to restore a work, right? For example, you had the emergence of digital tools, where, for example, in the 30s, there were black and white films that were cut. They are presented as, they were given color and they are presented as restored. But this is not ethics. This is not restoration. So it's important to consider all these tech themes, the recovery of techniques, but the conceptual and ethical meaning that restoration has. I think it's time to go back to this, to resume this, because with all of these tools at hand, one distorted this idea, this ethical ideal. The word is not so much ethics, but conceptual, the professional concept of restoration. And I think this space here, this place here is a good moment to consider this, which I think has been distorted a bit. And as multipliers of these possibilities, right, to show, to resume the ethical and conceptual idea of restoration. And also, it seems to be absolutely crazy, but this is something else that exists today. Nothing is really lost. Things are accumulated on the internet and different places. And we see the different versions of films, for example, with regards to Mujica, very quickly, and also replying to Rodrigo. This work was done away from Brazil, was paid for away from Brazil and done out of Brazil, but the work is not over. It continues. So now it is continuing in a slow way. We need to we hope to launch this in the film houses, in commercial. We want to show this in rooms where these films were thought and consumed, and films are being commercialized in the Brazilian channel called Canal Brasil, and at the same time, non-restored versions are still circulating. So they are available in some streamings. Especialista has a streaming. They have older versions. So people today don't know what they're going to see. And this even happened with myself, right? Even Cinemateca. I worked on Paulino films. We remasterized it, and slowly we are being able to restore the short films. And this work is very difficult. There isn't a centralization of information. Apart from a moment, you have a good copy and approved, but you can't have its exhibition. So some weeks ago in Cinematheque, one projector, the films of Luna, she co-directed 2 films with Aloysio. And I said, but these are the copies that were restored and played. No, they're the copies that you did, but not in 2016. You have the ones that from last year. And all this information is difficult. You don't know what is the last version that exists, so it's crazy. We are in a world which is insane. And we're going to have to learn how to deal with this. For example, Mujica's films, the contract will expire and it will not be in streaming in the precarious condition as before, but it will continue in the internet unless we put it in the internet saying 4K, something that will, show one's attention. It's crazy. We're going to have to learn how to deal with this kind of thing too. I think that things can be complementary. The financing of the market that allowed you to work on Mujica's work is just amazing, right? So the films come back. And vis-a-vis all of this universe of things that can lose themselves. So what is the common thought that that joins market and preservation? The issue has to be systemized. What agonized me is that things are sort of hanging loose. You don't have a systematization here, Paulo. Things are restored. So I think there should be a strong debate here, because that is the problem. How do you do here with all that is being lost? We began this work with Mujica in the Cinemateca. It was closed. We were able to make this possible, and we needed access. And the work began here, but it's not over yet. These new digital matrices are going back to the Cinemateca. I still haven't delivered it to Cinemateca, but Cinemateca will receive the material and preserve it as best as possible. Best, but I have a mea culpa here, right? I have to blame. When I began the work, I wanted to have my report of the different films I was doing. I was going to deliver everything together. The first one was good, the second good, and so there was so much work that I didn't write it at that moment. And now I need to go back to that memory to conclude it. And when I deliver it to the Cinemateca, there should be something in writing to be consulted. And now I know that you have this fantastic work of Joaquin. I would have liked to have access to this before. But Paulo, you said that the work began in 2016 when the Cinematheque was closed. No, 2016 was the marginal film I worked on, Agripino. Now, this one began now, 2020, amidst the pandemic. That's when the money was given. But I can say it began well before. We did preservation here in Cinemateca, the photochemical. Here in Cinemateca, there were several masters, and without them, this box would not be possible. So it was a Cinemateca's preservation action preservation of the Cinemateca, because we began it here. We would like to. All the material we want to work with is the original negative of films. And it's not always possible. It's not always the best material. It's not always complete. Several materials here. I think two complete films were done parting from the negative. These are films that didn't have the possibility of getting to the quality they have now. Because without the filmic metrics, everybody said, your film is in 4K. Well, it is because there was a film. Because you can't, not every people knows you don't get a digital matrix in HD and transform it. You have to have this material before. And this work was only done because the material was very well stored for a long time. And they were done things that were very important. Specifically, the first film, Mujica film, which was entirely processed with inter-negatives. They wouldn't have existed without your work. HD for 2K and 4K today is very well done. Okay, so now I think I will give the floor for those of you that want to ask your questions. Very soon, Carla will come here to stop the session. So if anybody wants to ask questions. Good afternoon. My name is Murilo. I want to know the decision taking with regards to contrast, temperate, highlight, and shade when you're restoring films. And you don't have copies, original copies, with good quality. As you yourself said, Patrícia said, the films have characteristics that can show you how things were done. Perhaps things of the time. That's it. There is a series of ways of doing this. My contribution in some restoration projects has been as a director of photography. I participated in the restoration of projects and films that I myself filmed, right? So I knew the face of that film. And also I participated in restoration projects of generational colleagues, of people I had worked with as assistant. And I also felt very free to work, to send, uh, to talk about, to help with this film, always parting from copies, materials, photographies, the initial uh, research. Once you elect the matrix is projected to everybody involved, and then we begin to analyze and think about it. There are procedures that are traditional, they're technical, that photochemical labs used to do. You have to preserve the black, all tones of grays. There are technical parameters that usually result in a technically correct reproduction of the film. Yeah, so when you work deal with films where you have no relationship with the film, it's complicated. And then sometimes you have to refer to that guy that worked in the film that perhaps can give an opinion. Directors. We have had restoration cases of restoration. Can I mention names? We had cases. We had a colleague that is not with us anymore that was going to restore a film without going into details. And when he sat with the colorist, I said, I'm going to do the film that they didn't allow me to do at the time. He did this. When the film was projected, there was a full scandal with people that had memories of that film. And the people responsible for the film ended up finding resources to restore the film again with new technology. They called people from the film because the film had a contract that didn't exist before. It was black and white in this case. And each case is a case. And we are never going to be certain that we were absolutely faithful to the cinematographer or the photographer when he's not here to help. And there is the press at the time, critics, reviews, what people that say how it was. What I think is that there isn't a budget for this previous research, and this should be included in the budget because you have to begin the project talking to the people that worked on the film, reading and consulting, because there is a whole bunch of people there. It's a whole time. Jorge's film that we're going to work on now, they portray a Brazil that perhaps will disappear very soon. So if we keep changing things, because fashion changes, right? And it's that moment, the film was in that moment, they portrayed that Amazon, right? I think there can be a double dimension between the market. It's something that is of easy access. But you have to have this respect to cinema. Why do we make movies? How do we make it? Why do we do it? What is being said there in between the lines? This has to survive too. So just to add to this, we are here in the Cinematográficos re- restoring a film of Roberto Cavalcanti in Switzerland. It's a film of the 50s. I had no relationship. I began to talk with a Swiss colorist. And my first proposal was to see if there are pictures of scenes of the film. And we found a series of photos of scenes of the film. We scanned it, we sent it there. She read, she saw the pictures, but she did her own interpretation of the pictures. And when I received the frames back, I think she had solved the film. I think it was absolutely correct. All the tones, there was a lightness in the image that I think the film had to have. It's a comedy, not a drama. So the practice of this colorist, who is a specialist in restoring films all over Europe, films of the 40s and the 50s, she has this point of view. She has this eye, and she gave us a material that seemed to be very adequate. So each case, you have to find a path. I also thought of a film that we did here, which was a huge challenge. Cabra Marcada para Morrer. So a film, at the moment of the launch of the film, we didn't have that moment, right? Because Cabra was, part of it was in 35, part of it in 16, reduced to 16. We tried to have a copy of 16 reasons, and then it had to escape censorship, right, and destruction, so we had to include it. In 1883 Cannes, we did this work. This film is called The Man Marked for Death, okay? We picked up all this material with Cotivo alive, watching and participating in the restoration of this film, A Man Marked for Death, right? The 1984 Brazilian documentary film. So since we're telling stories now, I think you forgot something very important. Fernando Artes was alive at the time, cinematographer, like the director of photographer. You had produced a book on Fernando's work with his annotations of the time, the table of grays he used, and this guided our work. He didn't participate, he just approved. Because he was living in Brasilia at the time, it was difficult for him to come, but we talked to him, and he was incorporated in the process. Coutinho was saying he didn't want to know about the color magenta. Any more questions? I'm really, really touched to everything all of you said. I feel very mobilized. I am Tata Amaral, film director. I really feel mobilized by everything that you all said. Contaminated, really, with all this problematic. All the time, I keep reflecting. It's a recent difficulty I went through when I worked on a film, trying to tell the story of the Brazilian cinema, starting from the production of women. Just how difficult it is to find film to be able to show. I'm talking about recent films. Just how difficult are the availability of these films. And I'm really, I feel I'm really nervous. with with the difficulty of maintaining live these film collections, right? To have to how to restore them and to allow the films to circulate. I have a very dear friend, I think you all know, which is Solange Farkas. She is director of Video Brazil, with one of the largest video art collections in South America. And she's always said to me, as a rule, we have to maintain the original metrics because technologies change. And you are, in a way, um, confirming this. And she talks about the importance of activating all these collections, film collections. It's no good storing. The film has to be in the memory of people. And I think Cinemateca contributes, like Video Brazil, for this kind of knowledge so that it is shared by everybody and it is with us. And another provocation for you. Currently, I'm very anguished with the idea of wanting to digitalize my film. I can't do this because there is never time in the Cinemateca for this to happen. So I would also like to talk about the importance of us permitting people to know films that were produced. My first film was filmed 30 years ago. And Jean-Claude Bernardet, which is Paulo Emilio's disciple. I would love him to see a restored copy in 35 millimeters. My provocation, considering a restoration policy and the activation of its collection, and thinking that we have a huge amount of Brazilian films and most important films, I want to know, for example, the important, for films that are not so old, people that are still alive, director of photographers that are still alive, I mean, mixers and sound editors that are still alive, they can still work on these newer films, newer matrices. In a way, is to allow new generations to learn more about our cinematography in Brazil, our films in Brazil, the history of film in Brazil. So I think it's a macro issue involving resources, a federal program for restoration and activation of the film collections. I'd like to reiterate that I want to know where is this in your hearts? Once again, thank you very much. Some examples are highlighted in our celebration 50 years later in the Brazilian Cinemateca. There are many initiatives that I think we can have more effectiveness in these crossings, right? All the way from curatorship proposals. Last year, we began a partnership with the Institute of Stanford University that allowed for 2 short films, 16 millimeters, live photographer. He approved the marking last year. Everything worked out. The next one, we're going to do this internally here. The film that Lauro mentioned, restored in Switzerland, Alberto Cavalcanti filmed. So the Cinematheca's concern continues, needs to be dosed between two shorts, Sally Streetwood, restored last year, two from the 70s, everything we were able to do before and after, but it is the result of this partnership, all of this, the nitrates, right? So our effectiveness only happens when these partnerships emerge and happen. Bodansky, we have several partnership skills that allow for this. Because if this work was only done in the Brazilian Cinemateca, we wouldn't even manage to have it 1/10 of what we can do when we work with other agents in this restoration area. That we hope that will grow even more. If you didn't have this partnership, the Cinemateca cannot restore nor digitalize. You can, but it's a limit of production capacity. I'm sorry. I need to speak with Tata in this sense, because when Tata says she cannot digitalize films because there is never any time in the Cinemateca, I was kind of nervous with Tata because obviously the ideal is to have a program of restoration of the whole Brazilian cinematography, all the film collection that the Cinemateca has, 80,000 films, 80,000 titles that it has in its collection. And it's unreachable. I don't know if a country would be able to have this, to have 80,000 films and have to begin restoring, not digitalized, restore. So imagine its cost. Imagine the cultural policy to be developed for this to happen, which is something that never existed in this country, because even in the period when Gilberto Gil was Minister of Culture, when Cinemateca had a contract, a 5-year contract with the Ministry of Culture, which was the golden period of Cinemateca, even at this moment, one advanced a lot, one progressed a lot, but one did not even come close to what we would have liked to have come. It was 1 year and a half of closed Cinemateca, 10 years of crisis. When do you resume this? You have to be really crazy to resume this. I consider myself completely mad to lead this, this resumption, this thing that we are resuming. And I am very proud of what I'm doing, because somehow I am returning the Cinemateca that Cinemateca gave me when I started studying films in USP when I was a girl. And I graduated from the films that I saw in the Cinemateca at the time. So, going back to this issue today, we've already talked more than once about the interest of digitalizing and restoring and digitalizing, or just digitalizing your work. We've talked about this more than once. It is not that the Cinematheque doesn't want to see to you, has no time to do the work. There is lacking a project, eventually more resources, and I don't know if you know, Cinemateca has just had a cut of 30% of its budget. We were told about this on Friday. They cut 30% of our budget. Immediately cut. Reduction, 30% reduction in our budget. They didn't even ask us if we could do this, and we have to do it, right? Without losing one single employee. The main principle here is nobody would be deployed. Nobody would be dismissed. Nobody would be laid out. And I said, and you say, how to restore or digitalize or bring to life the current films, the contemporaneous films, where directors are still alive and everybody is alive. Well, you need a program. At this moment, it is not possible to have a program without resources, and resources that the Cinemateca has cannot include everything that needs to be done. Yes, we need to capture, to raise money. Yes, we need to have a project that is not only from Cinematográficos, but from the film directors themselves. So help us to raise the funds so that we can work. Rodrigo said, we are working not only with our own laboratories, we're working with partners because only our lab cannot do everything that needs to be done. We have a scanner, AHI, and ever since we started here, we haven't been able to make it work, this AHI work, because it was paralyzed because of the whole crisis, and we're struggling to contribute. When we speak with technician and another technician. So this is the best we have. We have others. We are being able to buy things because of projects, FAPESP project, fundraising by Pronex, projects we work in Canal 100, the channel 600 is open, waiting for resources, saying what we can say. So it's a joint effort, Tata. It's no good asking Cinematográficos if they have time to be able to see to you or not. We would like to be able to see to everybody, but the reality is a whole other. Thank you, Donna. Just to clarify things, it is clear. What was not clear in our conversations that I should also raise money, and I think now it is clear. I didn't know, and also when I asked, I don't want to talk exclusively of my work, but it's the work of a recent generation that experienced the difficulty with all the different media. A film 30 years ago is not exhibited today. A film of 20 years ago or 10 years ago cannot be exhibited today because its media is lagging. But Tata, I'm sorry to say, but this is not only the responsibility of Cinemateca. I think producers and directors have to participate in this fight, have to go out the resources, and have to help Cinematográficos. I think to consider Cinemateca as the only provider of service and matrices is an injustice with the Cinemateca. But I'm not talking about this, Lauro. I'm not saying this. I think that we go after, but obviously producers have no way of being able um, to to pay for all the passage of LTO5. Neither nor Cinemateca had the conditions. That's why I'm proposing for this space for us to launch to begin thinking about our Brazilian collection. I'm not, I'm not putting all of this on Cinemateca's back. No, but I want to see films from other people. Well, I'm not going to prolong myself. I would just like to say that there are solutions, partnerships. you were talking about a partnership, and I think it's very important for producers to contact Cinemateca, going after partnerships. Cinemateca is a very strong entity, and they can lead this partnership. But it's important to format projects together. A quick testimony, Tata. Ever since I began doing movies in the beginnings of the 90s, I think Cinemateca has never had such open doors for partnerships. Its doors have never been so open for partnerships, right? And this is very clear. When I began making films, what did it mean to restore a film? You would get a film and duplicate it, and Cinemateca used to do that. One didn't exactly know, well, this wasn't open, right? Those that are working with this, they know the urgencies and the films that are dying, negatives that are going to be disposed of. And as a film director, it's very cruel for us to see this problem and know that the problem is just huge. I think in the last year, some people have taken action with regards to some films. There are some hairs, like Joaquim, Glauber, Rocha, Leon Hirschman. They were able to do this. But how do you do this? It is a lot of money that enters. We can't put it all in our bags and I'm going to do this, right? I think that film directors have to join efforts to demand money, a more decent type of, money for digitalizing of from governments, right? To digitalize films. This has existed in the past, and it wasn't possible. People began with 6 people in a bed, and the other one with one film. So how does one work with 6 films and the other with one film? And so we kind of have to learn how to do this. But our pressure, we need to join the efforts in order to demand from the government. For this to be an issue, producing is essential, is most important. But to preserve is very important. You have to have money to do this. Very good. Thank you very much, Paulo. Now I think it's time, right? So thank you very much, all of you. I would really like to thank the panel. We will continue discussing this, right? So if you want to continue, unfortunately, we have time to keep. So our next panel is going to be a Canon presentation with director of photography.